Marcus discovered the old radio in his grandmother's attic 3 days after her funeral. It was a beautiful thing, all burnished wood and brass dials, though covered in decades of dust. When he turned it on, expecting nothing, static crackled to life with surprising clarity. He brought it home to his apartment, thinking it might look good on his bookshelf. That first night, he fell asleep to the white noise, finding it oddly comforting. Around 3 in the morning, he woke to voices. Not voices exactly, whispers. Dozens of them, overlapping, coming from the radio. He sat up, heart hammering, and reached for the dial. But as his fingers touched it, the whispers stopped, just static again. The second night, he left the radio off, but at 3 a.m., it turned itself on. The whispers were clearer now, and he could almost make out words. Almost. He unplugged it and shoved it in his closet. At 3 a.m., it whispered from inside the closet, still unplugged. Marcus pulled it out, hands shaking. "What do you want?" he asked the darkness. The static shifted, resolved. A single voice emerged, cold and distant. "We want you to listen." He should have thrown it away, he knew that, but something compelled him to keep it, to tune in each night at 3 a.m. The voices became voices, telling him things, secrets about his neighbors, the affair in 4B, the embezzlement in 7C, the terrible thing the man in 2A had done in college. Marcus started to feel powerful knowing these things. He'd smile at his neighbors in the elevator and they'd shift uncomfortably, somehow sensing his knowledge. Then the radio started telling him things about himself. "You were cruel to Sarah in high school," it whispered. "You know what you did." He did know. He'd tried to forget. "You stole from your father. You let your friend take the blame." Night after night, the voices cataloged his sins, small ones, large ones, things he'd rationalized away or buried deep. And then they started telling him things he didn't remember doing. "You pushed your brother down the stairs when you were 6. You meant for him to fall." "No," Marcus said. "He tripped. It was an accident." "You wished your grandmother dead so you could inherit." That's not true. But was it? He'd thought about the inheritance. Everyone does that, don't they? The voices grew more insistent, and Marcus found he couldn't turn the radio off anymore. It was always on, always whispering, rewriting his history with its accusations. He stopped going to work, stopped answering his phone. He sat in front of the radio, listening, as it told him who he really was. His brother found him 2 weeks later, after the neighbors complained about the smell. Marcus was sitting cross-legged in front of the radio, eyes open but unseeing, lips moving silently. The radio was on, filling the room with whispers. His brother unplugged it, and Marcus collapsed like a puppet with cut strings. At the hospital, he wouldn't speak, just moved his lips in that same silent pattern, as if still listening to something only he could hear. The doctors called it a psychotic break, but his brother kept the radio, curious despite himself. He plugged it in one night just to see. At 3 a.m., it whispered to him, "We want you to listen." And he did. The antique shop on Melrose Street had been empty for years before Elena moved in. The previous owner had disappeared, the locals said, though no one seemed to remember exactly when or how. Elena didn't care about small-town gossip. She had dolls to sell. Her dolls were exquisite, handcrafted with a precision that bordered on obsessive. Porcelain faces with glass eyes that seemed to follow you. Articulated joints that moved with unsettling fluidity. Hair that felt too real. Each one took her months to complete, and collectors paid thousands for them. She lived in the apartment above the shop, where her workshop took up most of the space. Shelves lined every wall, crowded with dolls in various stages of completion, Heads without bodies, bodies without heads, arms and legs hanging from hooks like a serial killer's trophy room. At night, she could hear them moving. Just small sounds, the creak of a porcelain head turning, the soft tap of fingers on wood. She told herself it was the old building settling, pipes expanding and contracting. But sometimes she'd come down in the morning to find dolls in different positions than she'd left them. A customer came in one Tuesday afternoon, a thin woman with hungry eyes who went straight to Elena's masterpiece, the doll she'd been working on for over a year. It was a little girl, maybe 7 years old, with blonde ringlets and a blue velvet dress. The eyes were Elena's finest work, chips of real sapphire set behind the glass. "How much?" the woman asked. "She's not for sale." "Everything's for sale." The woman pulled out a checkbook. "Name your price." Elena felt a strange possessiveness surge through her. "No, I'm sorry. She's not finished." The woman left angry, and that night Elena heard the sounds again, louder this time. Definite footsteps, small ones, pacing above her bedroom. She went up to the workshop with a flashlight. The masterpiece doll was standing in the middle of the room. Elena's hands shook as she approached it. She'd left it sitting in its chair by the window. She was certain of it. But here it was, standing, arms at its sides, head tilted slightly as if listening. "It's not possible," Elena whispered. The doll's head turned toward her voice. Elena ran. She should have kept running, should have left the shop and never come back. But the dolls were her life's work, her children in a way. She couldn't abandon them. She researched the shop's history instead, found old newspapers in the library, articles about the previous owner, Margaret Hollis, master doll maker, who'd lived in the shop for 40 years, who'd had a daughter who died young, who'd made one final doll before she vanished. A doll with blonde ringlets and a blue velvet dress. Elena went back through her inventory records, trying to figure out where she'd gotten the doll's base form, the armature she'd built upon. But there was no record. She didn't remember buying it, didn't remember making it. It was as if it had always been there. That night, she woke to a weight on her chest. The masterpiece doll sat on her, those sapphire eyes inches from her face. Its mouth opened, revealing tiny, perfect teeth. "Mama? Where have you been, Mama?" Elena tried to scream, but porcelain fingers covered her mouth. The doll was impossibly strong, impossibly heavy. "I waited so long in the dark, but you came back. You always come back." The other dolls crowded into the bedroom doorway, a mass of painted faces and glassy eyes, all watching as their sister climbed off Elena's chest and took her hand. "Come play with us, Mama. Come play forever." They found Elena 3 days later, sitting in her workshop surrounded by dolls. She was smiling, but her eyes were glass. Her skin had the smooth perfection of porcelain, and her joints moved with clicking precision when the police tried to lift her. The shop is open again now. The new owner makes beautiful dolls, though she doesn't remember her name or how she got there. The locals stay away, but collectors still come from far and wide. And late at night, if you listen carefully, you can hear the sound of children laughing in the dark. The house on Blackwood Lane didn't exist on any map. GPS directions ended 2 streets over, and postal workers swore the address had never been on their routes. But Daniel could see it clearly, a Victorian mansion set back from the road, paint peeling and windows dark. He only noticed it after his wife left him. Before that, he'd driven down Blackwood Lane 100 times and never seen anything but empty lots. But now, in his loneliness, there it was. The front door was unlocked. Inside, the house was full of things. Furniture from different eras crowded the rooms. Photographs of people he didn't recognize covered the walls. Books filled cases that lined every hallway. It should have felt like trespassing, but instead it felt like coming home. Daniel started visiting every day after work. He'd sit in the study, reading books he found there, drinking from dusty bottles in the kitchen. The house was always warm, always quiet, peaceful. He began to forget why he was upset. Something about a woman, he thought, but her face was getting harder to remember. He brought a sleeping bag and started staying overnight. The house never felt abandoned. Sometimes he heard footsteps on the floor above or found coffee already made in the kitchen, still hot. Once he saw a shadow move past a doorway, but when he called out, no one answered. Weeks passed, or maybe months. Time felt strange in the house. Daniel stopped going to work, stopped checking his phone. He couldn't remember his password anyway, couldn't quite remember where he'd worked. He found a photograph of himself in one of the albums. He was younger, standing next to a woman whose face had been scratched out. Had he lived here before? The memory was there, somewhere, just out of reach. More photographs appeared. Daniel at different ages, always in the house. Daniel as a child on the stairs. Daniel as a teenager in the garden. Daniel as an old man, sitting in the study where he sat now. That frightened him finally. He tried to leave, but the front door opened into another room of the house. Every exit led deeper inside. He ran through corridors that shouldn't exist, upstairs that circled back on themselves, through rooms he'd never seen before. In the attic, he found the others. They sat in dusty chairs, faces slack, eyes unfocused. A young woman in a business suit, an old man in pajamas, a teenage boy with headphones around his neck. 20 or 30 people, all sitting quietly, all staring at nothing. What is this place? Daniel asked, but he already knew. He'd always known. The house remembered them. That's what it did. When people were forgotten by the world, when they slipped through the cracks of memory, the house called them in and kept them, fed on what they'd been, added them to its collection of lost things. Daniel found an empty chair. His chair. He'd been sitting in it in that photograph, the one where he was old. He sat down now and felt the house settle around him like a blanket. He couldn't remember his name anymore, couldn't remember if he'd ever had one. The other lost things sat with him in comfortable silence, and together they watched the shadows lengthen and fade. Sometimes new people arrived, wandering in off the street, looking for something they'd lost. Sometimes they wandered back out, but most stayed. The house always had room. Daniel's brother filed a missing person report, but no one remembered Daniel very clearly. His wife had trouble recalling his face. His co-workers couldn't quite place which desk had been his. Within a month, even his brother struggled to remember why he'd filed the report at all. The house on Blackwood Lane sat quiet and patient, waiting for the next person the world would forget. And inside, in rooms that folded in on themselves like origami, the lost things sat together in the dark, keeping each other company, remembered by nothing and no one except the house itself. And the house never forgot.